For years, a German shepherd named Max watched families walk past his kennel without a second glance, until one couple stopped. They adopted him, but what happened after they brought him home left everyone speechless. This isn't just a story about rescue. This is about healing, trust, and one dog's incredible second chance. Before we continue, if you're an animal lover, make sure to subscribe to this channel and share this video with your friends, because every share could bring new hope to a shelter dog. For as long as he could remember, the world had been small. 4 concrete walls, a rusty gate, and the cold hum of fluorescent lights overhead. The German shepherd's name was Max, though no one had called him that in a long time. On paper, he was dog number 4672, a number scribbled on a tag hanging from his kennel door. To the shelter workers, he was quiet, obedient, and old. To the visitors, he was invisible. Each morning began the same way: the sharp clatter of food bowls against the floor, the piercing chorus of barking echoing down the concrete hallway, the smell of bleach mingling with dry kibble and fur. The younger dogs would leap and yip and paw at the bars, their energy filling the space with a kind of desperate hope. Max no longer joined them. He had learned over time that excitement led nowhere. Instead, he'd lie curled in the corner of his cage, his once vibrant coat dulled by time and stress. His ears twitched with every footstep, every passing shadow, but he didn't rise. He had seen too much disappointment to keep trying. Max hadn't always lived like this. Once he had a backyard, grass, a boy who threw sticks and laughed when Max chased butterflies instead of tennis balls. He remembered warm hands, soft voices, a fireplace crackling on cold nights. But all that had slipped away like a fading dream, and he didn't know why. One day the boy didn't come home. The man, quiet and tense, had driven Max somewhere new, somewhere unfamiliar, a place that smelled like fear and sadness. And then the door closed, and Max was alone. He had waited at first, waited for the boy, for the man, for someone to return. Days turned into months. Hope hardened into silence. Now he barely noticed when families walked through the shelter. He recognized the sound of forced cheerfulness, the high-pitched baby talk, the claps and whistles meant to draw attention. He didn't look up anymore. He knew they wouldn't choose him. They wanted the wriggling puppies, the tiny lapdogs, not an aging German shepherd with tired eyes and a limp in his back leg. But on one gray morning in late autumn, something shifted. Max was lying in his usual spot, his head resting between his front paws, when he sensed it. Something different. Not just footsteps this time, but voices. Gentle, low, close. A pair of boots stopped in front of his kennel. Then another. He didn't lift his head, but his ears flicked, betraying his curiosity. He expected them to move on the way they always did, but they didn't. "He's beautiful," a woman whispered. Her voice trembled slightly, like she was holding back tears. "He's older," a man replied. "You sure?" There was a pause. Then, "Look at his eyes. He's been waiting a long time." Max blinked. He heard the latch on the gate rattle, a sound he hadn't heard in weeks. A leash was uncoiled. The kennel door creaked open. "Come on, buddy," the man said softly. "Let's meet you." Max didn't move. Couldn't. His heart thudded against his ribs. He didn't dare believe it. Then the woman crouched beside him, her hand outstretched, palm up. "It's okay, sweetheart," she murmured. "We're not going to hurt you." He lifted his head slowly. His eyes met hers. There was no pity in her gaze, no hesitation. Just warmth. Max stood stiffly. His joints ached, and his back leg trembled, but he walked forward one step at a time. She clipped the leash gently to his collar, and for the first time in years, Max stepped out of the shadows of his cage. The world outside the kennel looked brighter, louder, sharper than he remembered. The hallway stretched ahead like a path to something unknown. Other dogs barked as he passed, but he barely noticed them. He felt the woman's hand brush gently against his side. The man walked beside them, papers folded under his arm. "I think he knows," the man said. The woman smiled. "Of course he knows." At the front desk, the adoption forms were signed. Max stood quietly between them, still trying to make sense of it all. Was this real? Was this happening to him? The worker who handled the paperwork gave him a slow, tender pat on the head. "Good luck, old guy," she said, her voice cracked. "You finally made it." Outside, the shelter doors opened and sunlight spilled onto the pavement. Max squinted against it. The breeze was cool, carrying the scent of wet leaves and far-off fireplaces. He hadn't smelled the world in so long. Everything was different. New. Overwhelming. The man opened the car door, motioning for him to hop in. Max hesitated, glancing back towards the shelter. It wasn't home, but it had been his world. "You're okay," the woman said. "You don't have to go back there ever again." That was the moment something inside him cracked. Not in a painful way, but like thawing ice, a splinter of warmth, of belief. He stepped into the car. The door shut behind him. And for the first time in years, Max wasn't a number, wasn't forgotten. He was a dog with a name, with a future, and something incredible was about to happen. Something he never saw coming. The hum of the engine was soft, steady. It filled the space between Max and the couple like a warm lullaby, familiar and foreign all at once. He lay in the back seat, body curled tight, eyes wide. Every sound, the turn signal, the rattle of loose change in the cup holder, the occasional sigh from the man up front, felt sharp, important. Max didn't move. He didn't bark. He didn't wag his tail. He just watched. The woman kept turning in her seat to glance at him, her eyes shining. Once, her hand reached back and hovered for a moment before she let it fall. "Give him time," the man said gently. "He's been through a lot." Max didn't know where they were taking him. He had been in a car once before, years ago, on the day everything changed. The last time he had been inside a moving vehicle, it had ended in fear, confusion, and the shelter. Since then, movement had always meant loss. But something about this felt different. There was no rush, no yelling, no slamming of doors, only silence. Careful silence. And in that silence, something began to soften. The car turned down a quiet road lined with trees just starting to lose their leaves. The sky above was streaked with the faded gold of a late afternoon. When they finally pulled into a driveway, Max raised his head. The house was small but tidy. Pale blue siding. A red door. A porch swing creaked slightly in the breeze. Max sniffed the air through the open window. Grass, earth, and something else. Something like warmth. The man opened the back door, leash in hand. "Come on, Max," he said softly. "Let's go home." Home. That word again. Max hesitated, paws hovering at the edge of the seat. Then he jumped down, clumsy, stiff, and landed on soft grass. His legs shook slightly under his weight, but he steadied himself. He looked up. The woman was smiling, her hand resting on the porch railing. She didn't rush him. No one pulled, no one commanded. They simply waited. Step by slow step, Max approached the house. The porch creaked beneath him. His claws clicked on the wood. The red door opened. He paused. The smells inside were overwhelming. Lavender, old wood, fabric softener, food. He stepped through the doorway and froze. His eyes scanned the room. A couch with blankets, a bookshelf, a rug, a dog bowl, a corner with a bed. His bed. He knew it was for him. It had to be. There was a toy beside it. New. "Make yourself at home," the man said. Max didn't know how. Home was something he had lost long ago. Instead of the bed, he curled in the corner beside the shoe rack. His old habit. Walls behind him. Door in sight. He needed to feel safe. They didn't correct him. Dinner was quiet. Max's bowl was filled with soft food instead of the dry, tasteless pellets he had grown used to. He sniffed it, cautious. The smell was rich, the texture soft. He didn't eat until the couple stepped out of the room. Later, the woman returned with a blanket and gently placed it near his corner. "Just in case you get cold," she whispered. Her voice trembled slightly, as if she was the one hoping he would accept her. That night, Max didn't sleep. Not really. The house was too quiet, too warm, too good. He kept expecting to wake up in the shelter, to hear the barks of restless dogs and the clanging of metal gates. But all he heard was the soft ticking of a wall clock and the slow, steady breathing of people nearby. Sometime around midnight, Max stood up. He padded softly to the living room, looked around, and then, just once, he sniffed the dog bed. He didn't lie down on it. Not yet. But he stood there a long time, breathing it in, until his body relaxed. Just a little. In the days that followed, Max stayed quiet. He followed the couple from room to room, not close, but always nearby. He didn't bark, didn't play, didn't touch his toys. But he watched everything. Every door that opened, every chair that creaked. Every time one of them reached out and then pulled their hand back, unsure if they should touch him. They were careful with him, and Max noticed that. Once, Emily, the woman, dropped a plate. The crash sent Max scrambling under the table, his body trembling. But she didn't yell. She didn't chase. She crouched on the floor a few feet away and whispered, "It's okay. You're okay." He didn't come out. But he peeked at her. And for the first time, he believed her. By the end of the first week, he had started eating while they were still in the room. Not when they watched, but close enough. He had walked to the door when Daniel, the man, grabbed the leash. He had sniffed the mailbox post in front of the house and looked at a squirrel without chasing it. He had started moving differently, not like a prisoner being released, but like someone testing the weight of freedom. And one evening, something small, so small it would have been easy to miss, happened. Emily was sitting on the floor, reading, when Max slowly walked over and sat beside her. Not touching, not too close, but near enough to be seen. She didn't look up. She just smiled and kept reading aloud. Max didn't understand the words, but he understood the warmth in her voice. And for a moment, as the sun set beyond the window, painting gold across the floor, Max closed his eyes. Not in fear, but in trust. Because for the first time in years, the silence wasn't empty. It was safe. The second week passed like the quiet unfolding of spring after a long, hard winter. Max didn't bloom, not yet, but something within him began to thaw. His steps became surer. His eyes, once dulled with caution, now flickered with faint curiosity. He no longer skulked like a ghost through doorways. Now, he walked with care, not fear. The transformation wasn't loud. It came in moments, like when he let Emily slip a collar over his head without shrinking back, or when he nudged open the bedroom door one morning and found Daniel still asleep, his breathing soft, his face peaceful. Max didn't enter. He just stood in the doorway watching. And when Daniel stirred and cracked one eye open, he smiled and whispered, "Good morning, buddy." Max blinked. That was the first time he wagged his tail. Just once, a single tentative wag. But it was enough. The leash became a symbol of something new. It used to mean cages and confinement. a thing that tugged him toward cold places. But now when Daniel clipped it on and said, "Walk," Max's ears would lift. The hesitation still lingered, but it no longer rooted him to the floor. Each morning they strolled down the quiet sidewalk. The world smelled of wet grass and chimney smoke. Max stayed close, sometimes brushing against Daniel's leg like a shadow that hadn't yet learned how to belong in the sun. On one walk, a neighbor's child ran out into the yard. Max froze. The child stopped too, unsure. The boy held a ball in his hand and smiled nervously. "Hi, doggy." Max didn't move. Daniel placed a gentle hand on Max's back. "It's okay. You're okay." The boy didn't approach. Instead, he knelt in the grass and rolled the ball across the yard. Slow, gentle. It bumped softly against Max's paw. He looked down at it, ears twitching. A memory stirred. He nudged it, just a nudge. The boy gasped and clapped. Daniel didn't say a word, just smiled and waited. Max sniffed the ball again, and for a brief second, his body relaxed. The tension slipped from his shoulders, and he stood a little taller. After that, Daniel took Max to the same park each afternoon. They didn't go to the dog area. Not yet. Too many scents, too many sudden sounds. Instead, they found a small patch of grass beneath a maple tree. A safe space. Daniel sat cross-legged on the grass, his phone in his pocket, his attention wholly on Max. "You don't have to play," he said once. "Just be here. That's enough." Sometimes Max lay beside him. Sometimes he sniffed the tree, the fence, the wind. Sometimes he just watched the birds flitting between branches, the way their wings shimmered in the light. He didn't chase them. He didn't need to. Something far more important was taking flight inside of him. At home, Emily began leaving the back door cracked open. It led to a small fenced yard, overgrown in places but filled with scent and sunshine. Max didn't step out the first few days. He would stand in the doorway, ears alert, muscles tense, gaze scanning every inch of that tiny freedom. Then one morning, with a deep breath, he stepped onto the grass. The earth was soft beneath his paws. He walked carefully, slowly. Not because he was afraid, but because he wanted to remember it all. The breeze brushing against his fur, the rustle of leaves overhead, the way the sun filtered through the trees like fingers stroking his back. And then, like magic, he stretched out on the grass and closed his eyes. That afternoon, Emily peeked outside and found him there, sleeping. Not just resting. Sleeping. His body sprawled, his breathing deep and steady. A dog at peace. She didn't say anything. She just leaned against the doorframe and wiped her eyes. Later that week, it rained. Not a storm. Just a soft, steady drizzle that turned the world into a whisper. Max stood by the window and watched the droplets trickle down the glass. When Daniel came over and sat beside him, Max leaned gently into his leg. "Used to love the rain when I was a kid," Daniel said, glancing out with him. It meant the world slowed down. Max didn't understand the words, but he felt the emotion in them, felt the quiet weight of shared stillness. That night, Max did something he hadn't done before. He walked into the living room, looked at the dog bed, and stepped into it. Emily and Daniel didn't move. Didn't even breathe, it seemed. They just watched as Max circled once, twice, and then lay down. A deep sigh left his chest. His eyes fluttered closed. And when Emily whispered, "Good night, Max," he twitched an ear, but didn't get up. He didn't need to run anymore. Didn't need to hide. The shelter was behind him now. It still lived in his memories. The cold, the metal bars, the silence. But it no longer defined him. And as he slept, curled in a bed that was finally his. A flicker of something returned. Not just safety, not just trust, but joy. Real, quiet, soul-deep joy, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of Sunday where everything felt still. The sun shone low and golden through the curtains, the house silent except for the occasional creak of floorboards and the ticking of the old wall clock. Max lay in the sunbeam, paws outstretched, his breath slow and even. He had begun to sleep like this often now, in the open, unguarded. Daniel was in the kitchen, humming softly as he poured coffee. Emily sat cross-legged on the couch, sorting through a stack of envelopes. Everything felt ordinary, until it wasn't. A knock echoed through the house. Max's head shot up, ears stiff, tail frozen mid-wag. Emily paused, her hands trembling slightly over the stack of papers. The knock came again, louder this time. Before the shelter, a knock meant excitement. Visitors, familiar voices. After the shelter, it meant fear. Max scrambled to his feet, backing into the hallway, his body low, eyes wide. His nails clicked against the hardwood as he moved. He looked toward Daniel, searching. What does this mean? Am I in trouble? Am I leaving? Daniel stepped calmly toward the door, glancing back. It's okay, Max. But Max didn't believe him. Not yet. When the door opened, a man stepped in. Tall, loud, the kind of presence that filled a room in one breath. A friend of Daniel's. His voice boomed in greeting, a joke on his tongue, laughter in his step. Max flinched. The man turned toward him. Hey, look at this big guy. You're Max, huh? He took a step forward, hand out, too fast. Max backed away, chest rising and falling, his body stiff, frozen between two choices. Run or endure. Whoa, the man said, pulling back. Didn't mean to scare him. Emily stood slowly, stepping between them. He's still learning, she said softly. Takes time. And Daniel? He didn't apologize. He didn't make excuses. Instead, he crouched beside Max and whispered, You're okay, buddy. You're safe. Max didn't relax. Not right away. But he didn't run. Later that afternoon, after their guest had left and the house settled back into its quiet rhythm, Max approached the front door. Slowly. Cautiously. He sniffed the floor, then looked back at Daniel. His eyes asked the question he couldn't. Did I fail? Daniel knelt beside him, scratching gently behind his ears. You did great today. Max let out a breath. He didn't know what great meant, but it felt kind, felt honest. That night, as Emily lay reading on the couch, Max rested his head on her foot. He didn't mean to. It just happened. A reflex, like something inside him had finally tilted toward trust. She didn't move. She just smiled, her fingers brushing gently through the fur along his neck. You're trying so hard, she whispered. I see you. And he believed her. More than words, more than treats. What Max needed was to be seen, not as a project, not as a dog to fix, but as someone brave enough to begin again. And then came the moment that changed everything. A few days later, a storm rolled in. Thick clouds gathered over the horizon, and by evening, the sky cracked with thunder. Rain fell in heavy sheets, drumming against the roof. Max began pacing. His paws tapped the floor. Left, right, turn, repeat. Panic built behind his eyes. The sound, the pressure, the darkness. It was too much. A memory surged forward. Nights in the shelter during storms, the water seeping in, the dogs barking in terror, the way the metal roof rang like a drum over a war. He didn't know where to go. He ducked behind the couch, then under the table, then back again. Emily crouched near the hallway, her arms open. Max, she said gently, I'm right here. He stared at her, torn. His body shook, but her voice held, not firm, not demanding. Just present. And in a moment so quiet the storm almost swallowed it whole, Max walked to her. Not fast, not brave, but willing. He leaned into her arms and sank to the floor, his head tucked under her chin. She wrapped him in her embrace, not too tight, but steady, like an anchor. Daniel joined them on the floor, kneeling quietly, a blanket in his hands. He draped it across Max's back, his voice low and steady. "You're safe, buddy. You're not alone anymore." And something inside Max broke. Not in pain, in release. The storm outside raged on, but inside that living room, surrounded by warmth and hands that didn't hurt, Max let go. He let go of the shelter, let go of the cold, let go of the fear that no one would come for him. That night, Max stayed curled between them until the thunder passed, and only the soft tapping of rain remained. And when Daniel and Emily rose and moved toward the hallway, Max followed, not because he feared being left behind, but because he had chosen them. In the darkness, in the quiet aftermath, Max curled beside their bed. No longer an outsider, no longer a question mark in his own story. And as sleep took him, a thought flickered, warm and impossible and real. "I'm not going back. This is my home." Morning light spilled softly across the floor, painting gold over quiet rooms, and the curled form of a dog who no longer flinched at the sound of waking. Max stretched gently, his legs unfolding like the petals of a flower that had spent too long in the dark. He no longer watched the door every time someone moved. He no longer waited for the leash to pull him back to the past. He was different now, and the house knew it too. Daniel brewed coffee in the kitchen, humming a familiar tune. Emily opened the back door, calling over her shoulder, "Come on, Max!" Max trotted out without hesitation, tail lifting high, his paws thudding softly on the wooden deck as he leapt down into the yard. The grass was cool with dew, the air crisp, holding the scent of autumn leaves. He ran, not from fear, but toward something. He circled the yard, ears flapping, tongue lolling. He skidded to a stop near the garden, panting. Emily clapped her hands, laughing, and for the first time, Max barked, a single joyful sound that echoed like a celebration. Emily froze, her hand pressed to her chest. "You've never barked before," she whispered. Max tilted his head, curious. She knelt down, eyes shining, and he trotted toward her. He didn't need a command. He just went. And she met him halfway, wrapping her arms gently around his neck. "That's your voice," she murmured. "That's the real you." That afternoon, they tried something new. Emily clipped a harness onto Max, not the tight, confining kind from the shelter, but one that fit snugly, padded and comfortable. Daniel opened the car door and waited. Max stared at it. It wasn't the same car that had taken him to the shelter. This one smelled different, like treats and people who waited for him to decide. He stepped inside. No trembling, no hesitation. Just choice. The drive was short. Max rested his chin on the window, watching trees and houses blur past. When they arrived, the car door opened, and Max hopped out. They were at a community center. Children played on the lawn, their laughter rising like music. Tables lined the sidewalk, filled with pamphlets, toys, bowls of water, and dogs. Lots of dogs. Shelter dogs, foster dogs, some trembling, some barking, some quiet and resigned. Max paused. He knew those faces. They were still behind the bars he had once pressed his nose against. Daniel leaned down. "You're okay, Max. You don't have to do anything. Just be here." Max walked slowly beside him, tail neutral, head high. A volunteer waved to Emily. "Is this him? The one from Evergreen Shelter?" Emily smiled. Yes, this is Max. Max heard his name often now, not shouted like a correction, but spoken like a promise. He lay beside their booth, surrounded by people. Some crouched down, asking to pet him. Others stayed back, giving him space. And then it happened. A little girl, no more than 5, shy and quiet, approached him holding a stuffed German shepherd in her arms. She didn't reach out. She just sat beside him, cross-legged, her small body still and unthreatening. Max blinked. She didn't speak. She didn't move. He watched her. She placed her toy gently on the grass and said, in the softest whisper, "He's scared too, like you were." Max inched closer, his nose twitching. He sniffed the toy, then looked at the girl. She smiled, just a little. And Max did something that made Daniel's heart stop. He rested his head in her lap. The girl gasped, then giggled, and ran her tiny fingers along his back. Emily wiped a tear from her cheek. "He chose her," she whispered. "No," Daniel said quietly, his voice thick. He trusted her. And in that moment, it was clear. Max was no longer just a rescued dog. He was hope in motion. That night, as the stars blinked awake in the sky, Max lay in the living room by the fireplace. Emily sat beside him, brushing gently through his fur. Daniel placed a photo frame on the mantel, one from earlier that day. Max beside the little girl, her arms wrapped around him, his eyes soft, mouth open, tongue out. A smile. Real. Earned. Emily looked down at him. "You did something incredible today," she said. Max blinked up at her. "You showed someone else it's okay to trust." Daniel knelt beside them. "You didn't just survive, Max, you healed. And now, you're helping others do the same." Max shifted, pressed his head into Daniel's chest. The fire popped softly beside them. They didn't need more words, because the silence was no longer empty. It was full of memory, of healing, of belonging. And as Max drifted into sleep, curled between the people who never gave up on him, one final truth settled deep in his heart. He hadn't just been adopted. He had found his purpose. He had found his home.